Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar and begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am currently on in Ottawa, Ontario, is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And as all of you are joining us today from many places across the country, near and far, I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Environmental Sustainability and Housing. It's a continuation of a series of sessions that were scheduled to take place at CHRA's Congress 2020 in Saskatoon, but are now taking place as webinars. We here at CHRA hope you are all staying well. My name is Dominika Krzeminska, and I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. So I would like to thank our sponsor of today's session and CHRA partner, Enbridge. We are excited to have Jennifer Cittadini, Advisor of Residential Affordable Housing Energy Conservation Program from Enbridge, joining us today as a panelist. I'd also like to introduce the other speakers today and our moderator for today's session. So we have Donna Mayer, who is the Advisor of Sustainable Affordable Housing for the Green Municipal Fund at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We also have Kareem Abraham. He's the CEO of Cambo Energy Group out of Vancouver, and Chris Ballard, who's the CEO of Passive House Canada. Today's moderator is Adrian Pacini, Principal of Strategic Design at SHS Consulting. So over to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Dominika, and welcome everyone. I'll just give you a quick overview of how we'll go about today's webinar. I'll also share the results of that quick poll for the panelists to know who you're speaking to. So about half of you responded being nonprofit housing and service providers. 15% of people represent government, another 15% in the private sector. 4% are interested citizens, and 23% selected other. I'm curious about that 23% of folks on the line. Most people, so about 90% of people, either have some or little proficiency in the technical side of green building technology. So that's the group we have today. We're excited to have you. So what we're going to do is each panelist is going to speak for about 5 minutes or so. And we're going to reserve 25 minutes at the end for a bit of a group discussion on some of their experiences. And then we are going to leave some time for Q&As at the end. As Dominika mentioned, you should have a question box. Unfortunately, there's no chat feature, but if you want to send us questions or even comments, you can do so through that question box, and we'll make sure to also pull those out afterwards and share them with the panelists so they have a sense of your thoughts. So with that, we will start off with Jennifer's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. So I want to thank, first of all, before I start, CHRA for putting on this webinar and providing us the opportunity to promote our programs and to share our experiences with all of you. So Enbridge Gas does have a number of demand side management energy efficient programs, and we do have a portfolio that is geared to affordable housing programs. And we are based in Ontario, and we recently, it's been a year that we've merged with Union Gas. So we are one utility company for natural gas for all of Ontario. Next slide. So the three programs that we do offer for affordable housing is our multifamily, which is 3 floors and higher. We have our new construction program, which is called the Savings by Design, and that is geared to both the multifamily and low rise. And we have our home winterproofing program that is geared for single family. Next slide. So our multifamily program is targeted for both social housing and nonprofit providers, as well as private market rate buildings. We offer incentives up to $2,000 in project incentives, And what this program helps is to provide housing providers financial incentives for undertaking capital improvements. So to reduce that building consumption, improve the energy efficiency, and to reduce those operating costs. We provide equipment incentives, custom incentives, and free in-suite measures, for instance, shower heads and heat reflectors. Next slide, please. So we do offer energy audits, and the incentive for the energy audits is $8,000 per building, and we do cap at $40,000 per housing provider, and we pay the full cost of the audit. Next slide. So next is our new construction program, and that's the Savings by Design Affordable Housing. This program is offered to both low-rise and multi-res builders or developers who are building to affordable housing buildings. The goal of this is to help those builders or developers build above either for the low-rise 15% better than code, or 7% better than code for the multi-res. And again, this program offers up to 120,000 incentives. Next slide. So how this works is the building developer will contact Enbridge, and we will put them through to a consultant. And the consultant will reach out to the developer and learn more about the project, and then take them through the next steps of the program, which is next is the IDP workshop, where we bring in experts like HVAC contractors, windows, to help identify what measures can make that building more energy efficient for them. Then they follow through to the construction stage. And once they've completed and they've reached their goals, they will be provided an incentive. And as you can see on this chart, each stage, there's incentives available for the builder developer. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have our single family program, which is the home winterproofing program. This program is free to qualified homeowners. And this is pertaining to detached semis and townhouses, and they are delivered by our community-based organizations, our delivery agents, who are expertise in energy audits and installations. And the purpose of this program is to reduce the housing providers' buildings by lowering their energy bills and increasing the comfort for their tenants. Next slide, please. So this program, as I mentioned, offers free pre and post home energy audits, and some of the measures that are available are insulation, draft proofing, basic measures for water measures, so that's your shower heads and your aerators, and we also offer free smart thermostats. Next slide. And to be eligible for this program, if it's a social housing and assistant housing or co-op, you're automatically eligible for the program, but there is a housing eligibility requirement. So that would be your home needs to be heated by natural gas, be an Enbridge customer, you pay your own gas bills, and the home must be built earlier than 1980. That's where we see the greatest amount of savings. Next slide. And that is all. So this is just our contact information for each of the programs if needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. And we'll save some time again for questions for Jennifer at the end. I'm going to move on now to Kareem from Cambo Energy Group.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks to CHRA for having me on today. I am coming to you from Coquitlam, which means that I am on a number of different traditional territories. And I recently just moved, and so the map that I had to look at, which is always interesting, I kind of had to relearn a little bit. So I'm on Coast Salish land, I'm on Coquitlam land, I'm on Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolen Nation land. I think it's important to recognize that as we do these sorts of things, recognizing that, you know, we need to be really grateful for being there. I'd like to start with a bit of a reality check. And so, you know, our work is done mostly in Indigenous nations. We do a lot of work in low income as well. But the reality is that 44% of First Nations people who live on reserve live in homes that are in need of major repair. And, you know, this is from StatsCan data. And, you know, 36% of people also live in homes with crowded housing. And so when we look at energy efficiency initiatives or sustainability initiatives, this perspective is really important to consider as we look at these initiatives. So if we go to the next slide, please. So over the last 11 years, in partnership with over 60 First Nations, we've actually developed a scalable approach, which includes software, tools, training programs to improve the safety, health, and efficiency of homes in Indigenous nations. Next slide. And I think you know, a really critical component of this is that housing improvements, both from a fundamental level and from a energy efficiency level, improve the social, economic, and health outcomes for residents. They reduce energy poverty, which is a big issue on reserve, and they improve housing conditions and reduce GHG emissions. So there's a huge benefit to taking on projects like this. Next slide. And so, you know, our work is really done from a holistic perspective. And so when we think about energy issues and housing issues, it's really important to understand that these two things are, you know, like all things in life, completely interdependent, right? And so what we often see in our work is that when initiatives look at only housing or they look at only energy, they often fail to achieve program outcomes. And so we really need to ensure that when we're looking at things like energy efficiency, we're considering the need for major home repairs as we do that, because housing conditions are so poor. And we need to ensure that when we're looking at housing solutions, we're also taking into consideration large-scale community energy infrastructure into the solutions as well. So it's really important to take these two things in with each other. Next slide, please. And so the way we look at this and some of the projects that we've had the most success in is looking at these four areas. So our work looks at energy systems, we look at construction, we look at climate and how we can understand it and mitigate changes, and we look at capacity. And so when we look at these things holistically instead of in silo, we're able to provide solutions and programs that address multiple issues at once, right? So if we look at what we call our energy action plan, we're able to provide a clear path forward to reduce energy costs, but you can't do that in isolation. You need to understand how construction is done in a nation or in a community. You need to understand how maintenance systems work. You need to understand what the skill level and trades are like in community and how those things can relate with each other and benefit from each other as well. Next slide. And so our approach is really, in terms of improving housing, is looked at in 4 phases. And this is work we've done over, really it's taken us 11 years to get to a position where we're able to really provide a robust map and framework to get to improved houses. So phase 1 is really about defining and prioritizing the work that needs to be done. There's often funding available for improvements of homes, but to actually have in your back pocket the exact work that needs to be done, the cost to improve homes, the cost for new energy systems and energy efficiency measures, that's a lot of work to get to that point. And so phase 1 is really about kind of defining what that work needs to be. The second stage is really getting to a capital plan and business case for all this work. And so we found that having this long-term plan allows communities to think long-term. It also unlocks additional funding from different places. So whether it's from the federal government, the provincial government, or different sources of funding, once we have a business case in hand, that it makes it a little bit easier. Then we move into construction practices, right? So again, as things are interdependent, if we want to look at improving energy efficiency for homes, but we don't have a robust approach to construction, those two things kind of go against each other. And so we want to ensure that there's quality control built in. We want to ensure that there's specification guidelines. These are the type of windows that we want to use. This is how we're going to, do construction in community. And so that's really important to build robust homes. Phase 3, we move into construction planning and support. And this is really where we're able to think about all of the administration and effort that's required to bring in contractors or to leverage, contractors in community. Look at things like project management. How do we treat documents? How do we ensure we have really good contracts? All of that work is part of it. And then we can move into construction, and then we can move into what's often one of the most important components is robust maintenance processes, right? So how do we ensure that the durability of homes is kept because we have really good practices around repairs and maintenance, and we're being a little bit more proactive rather than reactive. Next slide. And so our approach to green buildings or energy efficiency in our world is really not about energy efficiency. We feel that energy efficiency is a benefit that comes from improving homes. We feel that having a safe, healthy, comfortable home is a right of everyone. And so we really look to do those things or help improve those things on the whole. Energy efficiency is a nice byproduct of that work. And so our energy assessments are really more than that. They're really housing assessments. And so they do look at things like safety. They look at the heating systems, of course, energy systems. They look at health issues. So is there mold in the home, or are there other issues of health? And they look at comfort, right? Comfort's really important. There are, a tremendous amount of benefits that come just by having a comfortable home. And so that's really important in the work we do as well. And so here's a great example of some of the work or approach that we've taken. So Cuaracha Nation, which is in kind of the middle of British Columbia, beautiful place. We've been working with them since 2009, I believe, or 2012. And one of the things that is really important about unlocking funding from different places is finding different partners to pull in to achieve some of this work. And so we've worked with Cuaracha Nation, with BC Hydro, as well as Indigenous Services Canada to push a project like this forward. And so we're including things like education, we're including things like capacity building, and BC Hydro funded the assessments or home assessments of this work. And then we're able to turn that into a business case that we could take to Indigenous Services Canada through the new Approach for Housing Support program. And we actually got them almost $1 million in funding to improve homes. And so the reason we were able to put forward such a compelling case is because we had done such comprehensive housing assessments in a business case beforehand. And so that construction is happening right now in community, which is really exciting. And it's a great example of how you can kind of pull together different funders to achieve a specific outcome. The other thing that I think is important to note is that there's a significant financial benefit to communities from energy efficiency. I think we all kind of understand that. But when we look at really getting into building envelope improvements, looking at heating systems, we've seen a 37% reduction in annual consumption from this type of work, and that equates to over $2,000 a year for the resident. And in a community where a lot of people are on income assistance, $2,000 a year is a tremendous amount of money. And so we're really proud of this work, and we're really passionate about this work. But it also goes to show that the financial benefits and the financial investment of this work is really compelling. And so it's important to keep that into consideration as we look at why this work should happen, in addition to improving housing conditions for people on reserve as well.
Thanks very much, Karim. Those are some great case studies. I'm going to move on now to Donna while I just switch our slide quickly. Take it away, Donna.
Thank you, Adrian. So last year in 2019, the federal government endowed the Green Municipal Fund with $300 million to assist with sustainable, affordable housing. This fund has been rolled out earlier this year in May to offer programming in 5 different areas, all leading to a full energy efficient project. We have planning grants that offer up to $25,000 and cover 80% of eligible costs to help you with all the things you need, or some of the things you need to do at the outset, including visioning process, study grants to look at those preliminary needs that you have as far as what will you be tackling with your renovation or your new build. And then the 3 other categories of funding are a pilot project is a distinct one-off project that could be replicated, and it's entirely a grant-funded contribution and up to 80% of costs. We have 2 capital project funds, one for retrofit and one for new build, and we fund up to $10 million in a retrofit or a new build. Up to 80% of the eligible costs are covered by this contribution, and part of the grant for the retrofit program is related to how much energy efficiency you're going to achieve. So the minimum we want is 25% better than building code, and your grant amount will increase according to how great your energy efficiency achievements are. Particularly, we're aiming for reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Excuse me. And for the new builds, we will contribute up to 20% of eligible project costs to a maximum of 10 million, and 50% of the contribution is a grant and 50% is loan. We're looking for ambitious projects in these for these contributions, and we're going to support you to get you there. The Green Municipal Fund offers capacity building support when we offer funding. We offer broad-based capacity building support for groups that are just generally looking before they're actually funded. So if you haven't had a funded project yet, that's okay. We have awareness raising information products. We are in the process of developing a resource library, and we intend to connect participants with peer networking. When you get funding, we do offer support throughout the process. So we offer a help desk where project officers will assist with your funding application, answer your questions, provide technical assistance for funded projects. We have experts on staff who can assist you with your planning of your project. And then we will soon be setting up peer networks for the funded projects so that you can communicate among yourselves, share best practices, problem solve challenges, and so on. We're building our capacity building offer based on what we learn from the clients coming through building innovative projects. And we do want to encourage you to be very ambitious. We don't want, we're looking for innovative projects that really go for the net zero, really go for the best sustainability. Next slide, please, Adrian. This is an example of some of our information products that we have available right now. How to get started on a retrofit project, why to do it, how to develop a business case, and in high performance new builds, we also have some get started documents as well. We have many other resources in the works. Like I said, we only started this project last in May this year, so we're in the process of developing more resources. Next slide, please, Adrian. And then what we'll be launching soon is a regional energy coach pilot program. We will be funding people in third-party organizations that already work in the affordable housing sector to provide coaching assistance and help groups get their project off the ground with coaching, technical assistance services focused on assessing needs, identifying the conservation opportunities, supporting your business case development, conducting level 1 audits, and supporting your planning process. So we have a lot to offer and hope you will plan to do a green build or retrofit in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go to Chris, I'm just going to pull up your slides while you switch over the video.
Great. Well, we can move along. Chris Ballard, I'm the CEO of Passive House Canada, and we are a national organization that advocates for healthy, affordable, comfortable buildings that contribute to a sustainable future. Next slide. So who is Passive House Canada? And these are real Passive House Canada people in these pictures. You can click. We are a membership-based, not-for-profit advocacy organization. We do a lot of education and capacity building. We put on national and local events for folks who are interested in high-performance buildings. We provide member and technical services to organizations across the country. We have staff and instructors across Canada. We're based in Victoria, but actually I live in Ontario, and a number of our staff are with me here in Ontario. So that's just a little bit about who we are. Let's get to the next slide. So our mission is building a passive house to the Passive House standard. It means you are creating an overall greener and healthier building environment. And I was pleased to hear other presenters talk about energy efficiency, and I was pleased to hear about incentives for technical coaching and those kinds of things, because that's really needed when you move into this area of high performance buildings. And for us, high performance building is more than, and then this is what one of our first presenter was talking about. It's really more than energy efficiency. For those of us involved in high performance buildings, it gets a little frustrating if we only focus on energy. We have to take a whole of building approach. And Passive House for me meets that need through providing healthy, comfortable, well-built buildings that, oh, by the way, are exceptionally low or zero energy. So next slide. You can click. I like to tell people that the Passive House standard has Canadian roots. Back in 1977, the Saskatchewan Conservation House was built. OPEC was flexing its muscle with an oil embargo. Canadian governments were a little worried, well, very worried that we wouldn't be able to make it through cold winters, and so commissioned the Saskatchewan Conservation House to demonstrate some practical ways that buildings could be built to be exceptionally low energy, healthy, and comfortable. So the DNA of Passive House Canada is Canadian. Next slide. And you can click. So the key features of a passive house, it has a very highly insulated envelope. It is airtight. Next. It has high performance windows that are properly installed. It is thermal bridge free. That it has solar orientation with external shading, meaning that in the cold months you let sunshine in. In the hot months you have shading to keep that heat out. There is a high performance ventilation system with heat recovery. Next. There is efficient layout of services, and next there is very efficient equipment within the building. So let me say that Passive House and Passive House Canada knows that building to low energy standards, it's not new. We've been doing it around the world for many, many years. We've been doing it right here in Canada since the 70s. So this is not a new concept, building healthy, comfortable, affordable, low energy buildings. We have the program, we have the system, and I'm delighted to share a little bit with you today. Next slide, please. So very quickly, when we look at conventional buildings, they're, according to the United Nations, and we work with the UN ECC, conventional buildings consume about 40% of global energy use and contribute about 30% of annual global GHG emissions. So when we make the environmental case for high performance buildings, and in our case, passive house buildings. This is key to what we're telling people. Next slide, please. When you build to a passive house standard from scratch, you can achieve up to a 90% less heating and cooling usage than conventional or code-built buildings, up to 90% less. If you are renovating, retrofitting to passive house standards, you can get to 70, maybe 75% energy savings over the original building. And in both cases, you end up with a building that is highly energy efficient, but is comfortable, and healthy, and a resilient place to be. Next slide. Well, we like to say that passive house is not rocket science. Click and click again. It is building science. So it's not rocket science, but it is building science. And that building science is based on 3 simple premises around conduction, convection, and radiation. But you don't need to be experts in these areas. Quite frankly, you just need some people who can help you out, and our folks are here to help you out. So click on the button again. Let's move to the next slide. Great. So I want to talk about 5 principles of passive house construction. Again, this is not rocket science. Our buildings have super insulated envelopes. They have high quality windows. Those windows would be triple pane with E-coating and an inert gas between the panes. They use a ventilation system with heat recovery. That's key. That they are thermal bridge free and that they are airtight. And when you build a building like that, you get a building that provides year-round stable indoor air quality and temperature. You provide a building that's quiet and comfortable throughout all the seasons. And that quiet is really important when you, sorry, I'm getting a technical. It's asking if I want to leave the webinar, but I think I'm doing an okay job. You're not asking me to leave. That it's comfortable, really important. The quietness is really important if you're locating a building in a busy area, noisy area. There's that substantial reduction of energy use and operating costs. And for many in affordable housing, providing social housing and affordable housing, social costs or operating costs are as important as reduced energy use. When you have simpler systems that passive houses have, then you have much better operating costs. These are simple to use, durable systems, and as a result, you get priceless peace of mind. So let's move to the next slide. Good. Good for occupants' health, and this is key for those who are building passive houses that schools, hospitals, recreation centers, social housing, affordable housing. The indoor air quality is second to none. It's a very pleasant sensation of comfort to live or to work in one of these buildings. You have the ideal and consistent temperature throughout the residence year-round. The temperature is comfortable in all parts of the building, and you get adequate solar orientation, great acoustic insulation from outside noise, as I mentioned, and far less indoor air pollution. When you renovate or build to a passive house standard in a multiple unit residence, each of the residences should have their own individual air intake. So they're not sharing air with a neighbor, which means they're not sharing the smells of cigarette smoke or cooking smells from other neighbors. Everything comes from the outside. It's all run through HEPA filters and is quite clean. So this is really important in multiple units. And this is how passive house works. This is how passive house has always worked, and happy to share details with you as we go along. Next slide. I'm moving us along rather quickly here, I know. Let's miss this one. We'll go on to the next one. I've covered off this one. Future new builds and retrofits will be passive house. The National Building Code basically is outlined by 2050. They don't call them passive houses, but if you look at the technical standards, virtually everything built in Canada will have to be built to high performance passive house standards. So it's not new to industry, it's not new to manufacturers. By 2032, windows in Canada, for example, will be manufactured to passive house standards. So we're just getting a jump on things right now as we move ahead. There is a nice project in Hamilton, Ontario that involved, Hamilton's been doing a lot of great social housing work. Next slide. So what we're doing to help make this happen is we are working with professionals to provide development and training. We're educating decision makers in the building sector. So we're working with civil servants, we're working with elected officials, we're working with builders, engineers, designers to bring them up to speed with what Passive House has to offer, that it is a tried and true way of meeting low energy use, providing high comfort, and it's affordable. And we provide that to advocacy, education, and engagement with all levels of government. So let's click and move ahead. Let's do it. We'll skip this one. Let's carry on. So we talk about low energy. We talk about comfort and healthy environments and affordable. We also need to talk about Passive House being a highly resilient building. We know the weather is changing. We know the climate is changing. This is what Toronto is going to look like in the coming years, and I dare say this will be reflected all across our nation as it's going to be hotter. There's going to be more hot days. There's going to be extended heat waves, and the daily rainfall is going to be greater. So we're in for some really interesting times, and I advocate for Passive House standards because they are the highest standards for energy efficiency that take into account comfort and health. And I really want us to make sure that we don't bake into things we're building today, that we don't bake in lower standards that we'll have to live with or try and live with over the next 30 years, the life of that renovation or the life of the building. So next slide, please. Just want to highlight, we're working with the Toronto Community Housing. Like a number of organizations, they receive funding through the National Housing Strategy. It's requiring them to find a 25% savings across their entire portfolio. 25% is exceptionally low for a passive house, so but this is across their entire portfolio. So we have reviewed the opportunities with them for capital renewal, energy savings on a building by building basis, including fuel switching. So from fossil fuels to electricity. Electricity in Ontario right now is about 96% carbon free, and it's the preferred source of heating and cooling for passive house buildings. Toronto Community Housing decided to target Passive House Institute performance levels called EnerPHit. This is for their renovations. They have a number of projects currently in the design stage and the planning stage. Modeling with these buildings, early modeling, energy modeling that we're doing with them on these buildings show about a 70% energy reduction, and that will more than meet the 25, but more important, the buildings that they can't get to or will never get to this height of energy reduction, by coming in at 70% on the passive house builds and rebuilds, they will more than meet their 25% savings across the portfolio. Next slide. But when we talk to Toronto Community Housing, the first thing they talk about is the experience for their clients. Improved air quality, improved comfort, improved health, and building resilience. These are the four things, the four main reasons that Toronto Community Housing decided to move to a standard that reflects passive house standards. And you layer on top of this all the things I just talked about in terms of percentage of energy savings, lower operating costs, and they were sold on the passive house style. Next. So some of the important things, I'll zip through this slide. It's very important for, as I mentioned earlier, for government to take the lead in ensuring that we get to our greenhouse gas reduction commitments, that we provide, quality, healthy, resilient, comfortable housing. But Toronto Community Housing's impact on changing the market can be felt. For example, in their first big projects, they're going to be issuing RFPs for 200,000 windows. That in itself will change the marketplace right across Canada, quite frankly, because they'll be looking for Canadian manufacturers of those 200,000 passive house level windows. So a lot of exciting stuff coming out of the passive house world. Many people, I'll reiterate, haven't heard about passive house, but we've been quietly working in the background now for many years. Next slide. So if you're interested in learning more, we are here to talk to you, to provide whatever assistance we can. We have been involved with a number of affordable housing projects across Canada in providing some background help and making presentations to councils and housing boards wherever we can help to educate and to advocate on behalf of the Passive House Standard. And I'll leave it there. I'll simply say that Passive House has been building low energy, high comfort, high quality homes and affordable homes right around the world, across Canada for many years, and would be delighted to tell you more about it in person. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. And I'm going to actually ask all of the panelists to come back to the video if possible, and we'll have a short discussion and then answer. We do have some questions coming in through the question box. But first off, I think one of the questions that we were curious about is, in your experiences today, and you've all shared quite different experiences, can you tell us a little bit more about who some of the key partners or collaborators with whom your initiatives would not have been possible? So even thinking if it's a program that someone might apply for, who do they need to have in their court to make it successful and to implement some of these environmental sustainability ideas? And maybe I'll go to I think Kareem maybe had some thoughts on this one, and then if you want to chime in, just give me a little signal and I'll jump over to you.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So for us, partnerships are absolutely critical. We work with mostly in BC, but also in Alberta, and we're kind of trying to spread our wings across the rest of Canada as well. And so for us, of course, the nations themselves are the biggest partner, and we work for them. But there's also a lot of other Indigenous organizations that have a tremendous amount of resources available to nations. Utilities play a big role. As I mentioned, the case study from Cuaracha, the utilities funded a component of that work that we wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. And so, there's a huge level of commitment there from BC Hydro to help push that forward. And we also get funding from a lot of places and a lot of different governments, so federal government, provincial governments as well. And so the ability, when I spoke about having that business case and why that's so important, because it allows us to go and get other partners and funders for our projects. And so being able to manage multiple stakeholders and bring partners in is absolutely critical for our work.
Donna, I know you have a lot of capacity building resources at FCM, so maybe some of that involves partnerships or collaboration development, or maybe you have some thoughts on this question.
Absolutely. When we designed our program, we convened an advisory group of leaders from representing the co-op, nonprofit, and municipal community housing sectors, and their contribution to the program design was critical in coming up with a really responsive program that was responsive funding and responsive on capacity building. And we really thank those leaders. It's certainly by listening to the co-op, nonprofit, and community housing sectors that we learn what is the most responsive support we can offer to them. And in fact, what we heard was they had a hard time reaching the environmental goals that were offered are expected through the National Housing Strategy and the Co-Investment Fund. And so we designed our program so that we could help them meet that gap. So the cost attributed to the extra cost attributed to the sustainability measures, environmental conservation measures, is estimated to be about 10%. So that's why we went with our retrofit. We actually doubled that to 20% of project costs to help meet that gap. And we certainly designed our programs to complement CMHC's funding so that you know, we could stack the two programs together and people could achieve the sustainability goals that they wanted.
Great, thanks, Donna. Chris or Jennifer, if you want to chime in on this question as well.
So for Enbridge and our conservation programs, I would say associations makes a big part, like CHRA. Without the partnerships and sponsorships that we collaborate with associations, we wouldn't be able to promote and create awareness of our program so that housing providers and co-ops would know that these are available when they're doing either capital improvements or new construction. That's a big one because, you know, we're trying to get, especially new construction, because we need to get the customer at the design stage, not in once they're already through the program, through their construction. So it's that communication and that awareness to give the proper tools and to let them know, let people know that there's programs out there to help them with their conservation plans and to, you know, to keep their energy bills lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think our experience has been that you know, making sure you have close partnerships for. I'm thinking in terms of social housing, especially that you have close partnerships with your board, municipal staff, and council, so that they better understand what you're doing. I'm really delighted to hear all that Donna is talking about in terms of funding for the coaching aspect, because from our perspective, a lot of people haven't heard about Passive House standards, and this is one way of getting them up to speed and getting elected officials up to speed, and basically educating people that there's a way to do it. There's a way to meet that 25% or more. And as I said in the presentation, it's not rocket science, it's building science. We may need a little coaching around that building science. We may need a little coaching around construction techniques, but this can be done.
That's great. I'm going to ask one more group question, and then Dominica, maybe we'll go to some of the questions in the chat because I know there's quite a few coming in. What are some of the similarities among successful projects that you've seen? I know, Donna, you're using the language of, you know, you're looking for people who are, you know, doing ambitious projects that are being innovative. What does that actually look like? So maybe we could actually start with you, since those were your words, if that's okay.
Sure. So what we're finding is that having a clear vision from the outset is critical. Like Jennifer said, we need to weigh in and agree on the sustainability goals from the very beginning, because it's too late later if you've already designed something or you've already got a concept in mind. So definitely making sure your vision is strong and solid and inclusive, and that's where you set your ambition there. You know, you'll need a lot of perseverance to go through the whole process and maintain your vision, make sure that your vision is implemented. But definitely that's a starting point where we want people to spend some time, give it good thought, and do your research, you know, assess what's possible with your building. And in fact, you know, there's quite a bit that can be done to bring the operation of your building to better performance. So we really want to encourage that among groups.
Yeah. Can I, let me jump in for a second. I think the one thing that we see that leads to success is an integrated design process. And I think that's a bit of what Don is talking about. that it starts off with the client and architect working closely, then the top client, architect, engineering firm, and when possible, the contractor, so that everyone is sitting around the table. Before a shovel goes in the ground, everyone is sitting around the table talking about the vision, what's possible, budget, etc. And that saves money for the client down the road, quite frankly, because they can all make their trade-offs earlier in the program rather than later. Normally how it works is the architect passes the plans to the engineer, and the engineer says, I'll do what I can. Then the engineer passes the plans to the contractor, who says, what, are you crazy? I can't do this. So there's compromises, there's changes all up and down the line. That's expensive, expensive and time consuming. The integrated design process that Donna is supporting really allows all the players to sit down around the table and have very few change orders as the program moves on, and far less disappointment too, because the client knows now what they're getting. They know what can and cannot be done throughout the process, and everybody else, the architects, the engineers, the contractors, now all have their marching orders. And we have found the integrated design process is the only way you can really build to Passive House standards, and that's been key to the success of many projects across Canada.
Yeah, I would just maybe add from our perspective, retrofits in Indigenous communities. I think we really see that, for successful projects, to Donna's point, it's around outcomes first, right? What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and how do we work backwards to achieve them? I think really looking at a diagnostic approach versus prescriptive approach from an energy efficiency perspective is critical. Again, if you want to put an attic insulation, but you got a leaky roof, there's really no point, right? And so we try to stay away from what we call boardroom energy efficiency, right? If you're not crawling into crawl spaces and going into attics and truly understanding the conditions of homes, then you're not going to be able to put together a program that's meaningful. And the meaningful means that the homes are improving, and meaningful means that bills are being reduced. And so you walk in with some LED light bulbs, but doors and windows are broken, you're not really adding any value. And so that's really important. And a good example of this is we just got back from a community where one of our assessors was looking at the HRV installation, and the contractor didn't put in the mesh net to prevent rodents and insects from coming in, and so the residents stuffed clothes in that vent, and so there was no ventilation in the home, and so, like, huge issues because of that. So no education was done. Shoddy construction was the reason for that, and causes so many issues down the road. But if you didn't go into that home and look in that, you're not going to be able to find these types of issues that are critical to delivering projects that are actually meaningful for residents.
Yeah. I think, Adrian, if I can just comment, Karim is absolutely right. It has to be a whole of building approach, right? If you only go after, I think one of the things that frustrates me, if you only go after energy efficiency, we'll say, and forget everything else, you forget about the health, you don't address health, you don't address comfort, you're setting yourself up for some dangerous failures. So Karim is absolutely right. You need to take that whole of building approach.
Yeah, that's a great key message. Thanks for pulling that out. Jennifer, did you have something to add to this one on successful examples? Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say for our single family is a good example where, when housing providers or co-ops or are looking for doing retrofit work, to ensure that they look to see what else is out there. So what other utilities are offering, just to layer on those incentives. So, for our single family program, we offer free insulation and draft proofing, as I mentioned. But on the electric side, they would, offer other measures to help out that are free for housing providers as well. So I would just let the audience know, extend and look at, reach out to your municipalities to see what else is there to offer to help with your retrofit, so you could save energy and money.
Thanks, Jennifer. Dominica, I might turn it over to you to see if there is a question that you want to read out, and if you want, we can go back and forth on reading out questions, but you might have been looking at the question box right now.
Sure. Yeah. No, I like that. Let's go back and forth. There is one question that that I think has been brought up as a comment in passing by a couple of the presenters in this question period, and it's about boards actually, and it's about many times it's actually the resistance to implementation of energy efficiency projects. It comes from the board. And due to this person saying that it's due to mainly because of upfront costs and also because of maybe a reluctance to do things differently or in a new way. So the question is, what information programs, or maybe even what advice, targeted specifically at board level decision makers is available or you could give? And what progress, if any, has been made in this regard in your experience? And I'm not sure who. Okay, Kareem. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll quickly answer that. I'm sure everyone else has comments on this. I think from my perspective, a business case is critical here, right? So really being able to present a concise business case, not a 75-page engineering report. That doesn't help anybody, but a concise business case that really shows the impact of these investments. And if upfront capital is your biggest problem, you're in a good position because there's plenty of capital to push these projects forward. Happy to have a conversation with anyone on different avenues for that. But if that's your biggest barrier, you're in a good position because there's capital available. But if it makes sense financially, there's really no reason to not push these things forward.
Can I just add, the capacity building tools we're working on right now, we're definitely directing our content towards the board of directors, the decision makers, the owners of the nonprofit and co-op and municipal housing. And we realize that that's who's got to have the buy-in, and that's who's got to champion the projects and move it forward, because the boards of directors are the ones responsible for the ongoing upkeep of the buildings, the financing, and so on. And definitely we want to, deconstruct the information around this and make it manageable for boards to digest so that you can make those tough decisions. These are formidable projects you will be taking on, and you need to know what you're doing. So we are definitely designing our programming to help meet those needs and address those concerns of the directors.
Thanks, Donna.
Can I push in for a second? And I think Kareem is absolutely right that you need a good, succinct business case. I'm delighted to hear that Donna's group is putting together material for boards of directors. My comment would be, quite frankly, if you only focus on energy efficiency, you're not telling the whole story. There's money to be saved on energy efficiency, but let's face it, energy in Canada is pretty cheap. There's other things that can be done as well, and so that's where we like to talk about. We like to encourage people to talk about those other attributes of a high-performance building. The improved air quality, the improved comfort, improved health, the building resilience. You'll save money on energy, absolutely. If you're using 70% less energy with a passive house retrofit, there's real energy savings there. There's also savings on mechanicals. Passive houses, high-performance buildings tend not to have complex mechanical systems. So the day-to-day ability to run these buildings is lessened. Through everything from filtration and on. So simpler mechanicals means simpler maintenance and lower operating costs. And in order to build to a passive house standard, there's a much higher quality assurance during construction. So the building you get at the end is low energy, lower maintenance, and a higher quality build. And you can do all of that without it costing you a premium.
Thanks, Chris. Before I ask Jennifer if she wants to comment, can I just quickly ask a follow-up question to Chris, because we're on the passive house piece for a second, and it's about the current situation and the pandemic. So is the passive house industry currently looking into the issue around thermal bridging and balconies? Because COVID and the pandemic has made it clear that access to some fresh air is of great importance to urban dwellers.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that balconies are the nemesis of thermal bridging, right? Although there are systems that provide the thermal break from a balcony into the house, but the very premise of a passive house is all about fresh, clean air. So when we look at retrofitting or building from scratch a multi-family, multi-family, multi-unit residence, each unit will have its own fresh air intake. You're not sharing air with the neighbor next door or people on the floor. And the air that comes into your unit will go through a very simple HEPA filter that helps to get rid of odors and whatever viruses a HEPA filter can capture. So clean air is absolutely critical to a healthy environment. Low CO, low carbon dioxide, also very important for good brain function. All of that's delivered through good quality, high performance buildings. I don't want to sound like I belong to the cult of passive house here. You can tell I'm rather passionate about it, but you know, a good quality, high performance building should deliver all of these things.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass it back to Adrian now. We have a good number of questions and want to make sure that we get through them all. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And maybe we'll move on to more of a topic of barriers or things that can get in the way, because I know we've been focusing on the positive side of things, and someone's asking what issues have come up with building codes or other regulatory bodies that need to change to make some of this work, or just for it to be a little bit easier to implement. And if you don't have a direct answer to that, you can also tell us maybe about other common barriers that people face. So I'll see if anyone wants to go first. Yeah, Kareem.
Yeah, I think, again, from our context, it's a challenge of siloed and inconsistent funding, right? In order to get through to improving homes and buildings, you need to do a tremendous amount of work to apply for that money. And so a common barrier that we see is not having funds to do that initial assessment and analysis to get to a business case that will unlock additional funding. But if you can't get to that point, you know, nations just don't have this level of detailed data at their fingertips. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of funding to be able to get it. And so that kind of siloed funding that's focused on 10 different outcomes, you know, one year it's for this, the next year it's for that. That's obviously a challenge that we run into pretty consistently.
Can I just add, just to segue on Karim's point, the Green Municipal Fund's new Sustainable Affordable Housing Program, we're going to go at least 7 years, and this is for co-ops, nonprofits, and municipal housing providers, and we provide the funding for the, you know, visioning to the feasibility and so on, so all through the cycle. But we're asking people to build above the building code. So I don't actually see the building code as a problem. I see it as a benchmark that needs to be exceeded.
I'll jump in and say, I think the biggest impediment that we find is just a desire not to change, or fear of the unknown, we will say. You know, when you approach a contractor or a builder, you're told first, well, it can't be done. When you tell them the technical standards of the building, it can't be done. And then you say, well, it has to be done. So they come back and say, well, it can be done, but you won't like the cost. And you say, no, here's the budget, do it within the cost. Then the third time they come back and say, okay, we figured out how to do it, we can do this. But fear of the unknown and fear of change is the biggest single impediment. So, you know, our job is to get out and talk to people at all levels, government decision makers, building industry, design professionals, and show them just how easy it is to build high-performing buildings. And that's why I'm so excited to hear what Donna's offering, because she's got material that's going to educate board members. Jennifer's got some programs there, and Kareem totally gets what needs to be done. So I'm excited by what I'm hearing today.
So if I could jump in on the barriers, some things that we see, for instance, for the single family home winterproofing, because it's a free program, a lot of people are skeptical, like what's the catch? What's going to be behind it? And it's educating, housing providers, our, private single family customers that there is no catch. We're here to help. We're here to, reduce your energy bills and save money and increase the comfort of the home. Another example is what I mentioned to you before was board approvals, like, capital cost, capital improvements, is there capital budget? And what you alluded to, the question was to get those board approvals. But what we've done in the past is work with housing providers and co-ops and do presentations and give them those tools and that information to make it easier. We've also, like Kareem said, business cases. We have a slew of them that we could share with everyone to let them know what other people have done in the past and what their savings was and what kind of projects that they went through. And on our new construction side, again, our biggest barrier is getting those projects at the design stage as opposed to already being in construction, and that's where we allude to our business partners and associations and architects and, builder developers to know that we, Enbridge has these programs and we can help and layer on all those incentives to help them with that build.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll pass it over to you, Dominica.
Sure. I'll actually ask a question that's specifically for one panelist, and then I'll pass it back to Adrian to ask a more holistic question. So this one is for Kareem, and it's, do you work with new builds as well as retrofits? Any multifamily residential? And are external supports provided for operations, monitoring, and maintenance? So very specific to you.
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. I mean, so one of the biggest services that we provide is really around construction practices and construction policies. And so it's about how homes and residents and civic buildings should be constructed in the first place. And so there's new homes or new building construction practices baked into that. And then also for repairs or renovations to existing buildings as part of that as well. And so it's, again, about setting standards and guidelines and best practices, contracts, a tremendous amount of thinking that goes in. How do we leverage local resources as much as possible? How do we create as many local jobs as possible? Things like that are absolutely kind of both in the renovation world, but also in new construction. And then with respect to external supports for monitoring maintenance, absolutely. So for monitoring maintenance, we've actually got a software platform called Ethos that we've developed that is really a way for housing managers and from an asset management perspective to track what maintenance is happening within each home. And so if furnaces need to be replaced or insulation replaced or whatever home repairs, keeping track of that across 100, 200, 300 homes within a community is a big task. And so to be able to do that as well as include energy efficiency initiatives into that is really important. And so we've kind of built some systems specifically for that need. So happy to speak with anyone directly about that if they're interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian.
Yeah, and maybe this is the last question. We'll see how long it takes. We want to end right on time, but a lot of people panelists have been talking about, the need to bring these ideas forward early in the visioning stage. And so someone here asked a question about the integrated design process or integrated project management. The question is whether CMHC will fund a capital project that uses that approach. Typically, funders look for a competitive bid award for the construction contract award. Maybe you can also touch on some of those other difficulties of trying to get these conversations going early on in the process.
Well, why don't I jump in, because we're big proponents of the integrated design process. So normally you would start off with your architect and the client and bring in the engineering firm. So you have the architect, the engineer, the client working together. And when they decide on moving this ahead, that's when they can sit down with whoever is selected to be the contractor. There are some design builds that are out there that kind of reverse that, but the idea is to have everybody around the table, and in some of the projects that even includes key trade members, so that we can better educate folks in terms of what's required from them. But yeah, CMHC it's funding Toronto Community Housing. They're using an integrated design process. They haven't gone to the contractors yet, but that's the process they're using. As soon as the contractor is selected, they'll sit down before they go too much further to hammer out the rest of the process.
I really like that question, if I could weigh in. And I'm going to take it back for some discussion internally, because as we design our capacity building tools, we're having discussions among our staff internally who are dealing, for instance, with project officers dealing with funding applications directly, and our finance team as well. And something we came up with just recently was, the integrated design approach and actually construction management approach is likely a better approach for sustainable development, and something that we should be promoting. However, I hadn't thought of the implications with financing with CMHC, so that's definitely a great question to be posing here, and certainly one I will be taking back to the office to say, okay, let's double check this and make sure as the project proceeds down the line, there's not a hang up on the financing end of things, because certainly if you want to integrate your sustainable features and have it be an environmentally sustainable project, you need to have those decisions embedded from the vision through the design process and so on. And definitely the more you can tap into resources of professionals who have expertise in this already, the less resistance you'll have in making your project realize the goals that you set out in the beginning. So thank you very much, whoever sent that question.
Yeah, I would just quickly add that I think it's from a First Nations perspective or Indigenous communities perspective, I think it's critical that the vision of especially homes is driven by the community, right? So often we see homes that are CMHC homes or homes designed by architects in the States or wherever, that just are not functional for, first, the climate region that these homes are in, but second, just the way of life, right? So there's no space for hanging and drying meat. There's no space for storing wood over the winter, so you can have wood stoves. There's just a lot of lifestyle considerations that are the reality of living in a remote First Nation that are not built into the design process of homes, and that's been the case for the last 50 or 60 years for sure. And there's some really interesting stories and narratives around the history of housing in First Nations that I'd be happy to share around why that's kind of happened, and some pretty tough reads, but I think it's critical that the nation themselves is directing, this is how we want housing to work in our community, and so they have the plan, and then they're going to outside trades, or hopefully inside trades and consultants and things like that to push their vision forward, as opposed to the opposite.
Great. I know we're short on time. A couple people have been asking for the contact information, so I'll just put up people's email addresses on the screen. Hopefully you can see that. And if Dominica could just give me a wave that it's working properly, that'd be great. As we wrap up, one of the questions that we wanted to ask everyone at the end, and maybe I haven't prepared the panelists for this, but if you could try and do this in one word, the question is, what is the attitude needed to take on an environmental sustainability initiative like this? And if you can think of one word to share with the audience, what would it be? Maybe we'll give you 1 second to think about that. But otherwise, I'll say thank you for having me as the moderator. This has been a really interesting discussion. There's a lot more questions in the question box, and I think we might be able to export them somehow so that maybe the panelists can have them, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. So thanks to the participants for actively participating. Maybe I'll turn it over to the panelists for your one-word checkout, and then Dominica to close it out. Maybe we can go to, Donna's smiling a lot, so I feel like maybe she's ready with a word. So maybe I'll go to you first.
You did ask us to prepare for this, so I polled the staff, and 2 out of 3 said ambition, and 1 said perseverance. So I'll leave you with that.
That's great. And I'll let you tag the next person.
Okay, Jennifer.
I would say collaboration.
Kareem.
I would say holistic.
And Chris.
I would say positive.
Great. And I'll turn it over on that positive note to Dominica.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who participated in today's webinar, as well as our presenters and moderator, Jennifer, Chris, Kareem, Donna, and Adrian. So 2 things. We were recording this presentation, so we will be sharing it on CHRA's website in the next couple of days. I'll look through the questions and I will share them with presenters, and if there's any question that presenters believe would benefit everyone who participated, the entire audience, I will ask for the presenters if they have time to provide us with responses to actually send out to the participants. So if you asked a question but it wasn't answered, don't worry, we'll get an answer for you. And then also you will be receiving an email later, I believe today, in about an hour, with a survey about today's webinar. So we ask that you complete that, as it helps inform CHRA's future programming around webinars. And we thank you for that in advance. And yeah, that is all for me. So thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.